This conference will now be recorded.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Sandeep. Let me know if you can hear me and you can see my screen. Hello.
Yeah,
Thanks for the
yes, we
confirmation.
are able to hear.
Okay, I think so. Let me check if we can start. Okay, sounds good. So very good morning. And I just want to introduce first about myself. Uh, like I've been working as an IT professional, and I'm into the DevOps as my role. So I'm into this particular role since like I have the experience of 12 years of experience in various clouds, and I've been managing the deployments in the AWS cloud along with using almost all the services in running the applications in this AWS. Along with that, I started my career into an IBM cloud and later transitioned into the AWS and Azure. And I do have experience of 7 to 8 years in the AWS cloud since its inception. We started using that, and I have experience in migrating the normal applications from the data centers to the AWS, like what all the services to be taken and all that. And I can architect all the applications on the AWS cloud and all that. And currently I'm working for an organization, so where I like my skills are around the Kubernetes, AWS, and all the DevOps tools that are there in the market. So that is about me. And today I'll just give you a brief introduction of what is AWS and who can learn the AWS and what is an advantage of learning AWS and all these things. So maybe I'll show you a very basic application, like which is like Facebook or Instagram. Like what if you use it without a cloud, and what if it is like what if you migrate to the cloud, and what kind of advantage that it has, and how do we run the applications in the cloud and all that. So before coming to the cloud and all that, I just want you to understand, like maybe you will come from the different backgrounds. One could be a QA guy, one could be a normal student coming into the, like who wants to learn the cloud and all that. So this kind of course will be cluttered to all of you. Like I'll start with the very basics, and where we'll go with the real-time implementation of the cloud and how we use it. And if you're already in a DevOps profession or some kind of way that you're using the cloud, or if you want to migrate to a cloud, I'll also help you with real-time examples. And if you have any particular issue with your with your organization also, where you're trying to deploy the things in the cloud, and if you find any like at least architectural design or a system design discussions also, we can take it up in the course also. So it is not that only this kind of background people should learn this. Nowadays cloud is like everyone should know the cloud, because all their workloads are going into the cloud. So so with this, I'll just start with giving the basic introduction of the cloud, and later we'll move to the what AWS exactly provides and why we need to learn AWS. So you can just interrupt me during any of the slide or anything for a normal discussion, and it would be better if you come up with the questions also, if you think which is pertaining to this demo and all that. And firstly, like many people know what is a cloud computing and what the cloud computing does. Like these days, everything you see that you use the cloud day in and day out on many use cases. Like if you just take a snap or a picture, you try to store in a Google Drive or anything. So that's a storage cloud and all that. So generally, cloud is nothing but it is you're just using a kind of services which is there in the you can think of which is there in a kind of 1 second, yeah, which is there in a cloud. And 1 second. It's the screen. Let me adjust this. Okay. And like for example, you just pay as you go. Like there is no upfront or something. Like for example, if you want to, let's suppose if you want to build a business or something, and if you want to create virtual missions or something, you can just go to the cloud and you can create it. So you only once you create it, you use it and you pay it. So you can think of like a kind of electricity. So where you just use it for your requirement. And once you turn off your missions or anything in the cloud, there won't be any charges for you. So the cloud computing is everything is managed at a central place where you just utilize the services out of it. So it is not that you own anything here, like you just own your application itself. You have your application, you deploy onto the cloud and you start using it. So that you can think of cloud computing. And mainly the pricing, like as I told you, you just pay as you go. Like there is no long-term commitment or anything. Whenever a business needs it to procure any servers or if an IT infrastructure or something, you can just do it within the seconds itself. You need not procure them, you need not maintain a data center and all that. Just the cloud take care of you all those things. So it's a kind of utility service which will give you access to the technology, where you can just create whatever you want on the demand. So like there is no, as I told you, there is no upfront cost. So you can just take it out and you can use it. So if you want a database, you just go to the cloud, you create a database and you start using it. For example, if you want to have a server or something, like whatever purpose, you just go to the cloud and you create it and you start using it. So you need not think of anything of what is underlying infrastructure, how do you maintain that, and all those things will be taken care by any of the cloud provider. So that is about basic introduction of the cloud. And if you see what are advantages of it, so firstly, you can, if you, whenever you're starting a business, you will never imagine how much of the infrastructure you will need. It goes on increasing. Like if you started with a small e-commerce website or anything, let's suppose take a Swiggy or Zomato or anything. Once they start the business, they just go with the very basic things, like they just create one server and the application that they are having, they start building on that one. So once the market is growing, like their users are growing, then they need some kind of flexible platform where they can increase their infrastructure and where they can make their application agile and scalable and all that. So for this, the cloud is always a better platform to start with, where you start with the minimum things and where you go on building all the features for your application, and you try to use which the resources in the cloud. For example, if you need a databases, relational databases, or a NoSQL databases, or if you're going to if you're going to integrate your application with some artificial intelligence or a machine learning programs, all these things in the cloud, it gives you a more flexibility and integration will be very easy when you compare to the normal data centers and all that. So that is the reason almost all the business try to always go into a cloud or migrate to the cloud, because the kind of way you can enter into the market and you can grow into the market is very more advantage when you're in the cloud, rather than maintaining all these things in your local data centers or something. So people generally start their business or anything from their office or having a simple server, but slowly as the business grows, it will be a very difficult in order to manage all this infrastructure. You need to hire some administrative guys to work out upon that and manage the infrastructure and all that. But once you enter the cloud, you don't have all these kind of problems. So these are something about the cloud infrastructure and all that, like we'll discuss this later. So if you just see like the AWS, I'll just show you the dashboard which AWS gives you, and there are a lot of services that are having. Let me just minimize this. So if you see, this is the AWS console. So this is only purely for the demo purpose. I'll not go into any deeper things of what is all these things, but I'm just showing you, like for example, if you want to have a database, you'll just come here to the dashboard. You'll click on the database service that is giving you, and you just create it. So it would be as simple as that. So and later you'll start managing all these kind of services. So AWS provides you a very feature rich with which there are a lot of services in the AWS. You'll be using for different kind of services. Like for example, if someone is just starting their business, they'll go for a compute service. And if your company is already into a microservices and they want to deploy the microservices, dockers and everything onto the AWS, they'll use something like containers. And for example, if you're building a databases and all that, you use a databases section. And in this way, like there are a lot of different kind of use cases for which there are services in the AWS. So whether we want to learn all of them, no. Like we'll only learn the ones which are like the foundation for learning any of other services, whether you are in the big data, whether you are working on the AI or anything. There are certain services that are required for everyone to learn. So that is what this course mainly intends to, where we start with. So what I'll do is, so instead of telling you all these services one by one or what they will be doing, I'll just give you a simple example. So I'll just show you, like let's try to build an application called Facebook or something or Instagram, and let's see what all the like architecture that we'll go with, and let's see how the cloud will provide us with different things. And later we'll come back to these other slides. Okay, so let's try to build a simple application. Firstly, we'll go with what if there is no cloud? Like let's suppose you don't have any cloud and you want to build a Facebook. So what happens, like what kind of things you need to consider in your data center? And later when you're moving into the AWS cloud, how do we replace all those components and what are the services AWS is giving? So this always suits me a better example in starting with, so that I can give you a clear cut view on what are the services that are there in the AWS. So when you're building any application, the basic thing what you need is a VM. Like let's suppose you created a web server, so where you run your facebook.com or something. So any web server will have a disk, which is a normal, like if you take any laptop also, you'll have a hard disk, right? So any virtual machine will have a hard disk. And users generally, let's suppose you give some IP. So when you start your business or Facebook is starting something in the university, they'll start with an IP. So you'll have an IP where users will try to log in using the IP. So they'll hit the web server. But for all the logic and everything, you need to have some other component. Like let's suppose you want to analyze something, you want to connect to the database, and you want to run some business logic and all that. You need an application server. So an application server connected to a database, it's a simple three-tier application, how you build anything. So any of your application that you see in your organizations or anywhere, it's a simple three-tier application where you have a web server, which could be anything like Nginx or Apache or anything. And then you have an application server. It could be a Tomcat, WebLogic, or anything Oracle based web server or app server or anything. So app server is the main thing where it does all the logic and it will connect to the DB and get to you the details. So let's suppose this is a simple three-tier application, the first tier, second tier, and third tier, where you have a relational database where you store all the usernames and passwords, so that the people, when they log in into the Facebook, like this app server will like check the authentication in the relational database, and it will give you authentication and all that. So, and all this is placed in a private network. Maybe the web server is something which can be placed in the public network also if you want to access that. But let's suppose this is a simple architecture for a three-tier application of the Facebook. Now, once you add the relational database, the load gets in. Let's suppose more and more people started accessing this application, the facebook.com. Now you want to grow. Like there are two kind of ways that you can increase, you can scale the things. One is like vertical scaling, where you try to increase the VM. For example, if you start with 2 GB, then 2 GB of RAM and 4 CPUs, then you can go to 8 CPUs and 8 GB of the RAM, like where you are trying to increase the capacity of the VM rather than any other things. And there is another more scaling thing, like the scaling strategy, that is called horizontal scaling. We'll go into these things when I'm telling you more about the AWS cloud and how do you scale the things and all that. But for our convenience, let's suppose we take two missions here instead of one, because the load is more, like a lot of users are trying to access the application, and you need to increase more and more instances like this. So now web server is having two instances, app server is having two instances, and there is one relational database. But if you see now, you need some kind of component which can balance the load among these two. Like one, for example, once it hits, there should be a component called load balancer. So every user will hit the load balancer. From here, load balancer will will divert your traffic to these. Like first it sends one request to this one, second request may go into this one. So in this way, there should be a component load balancer which should manage everything. So now, like users cannot always remember the IP, you need something called fp.com. For this, you need to have a DNS server. So now the architecture looks pretty good. Like this is how you start the applications, at least. So where the people, when they type fv.com in their browser, then the DNS will come here, it will resolve, and the DNS knows that it should send to this load balancer. the request will be going into this load balancer, and it will be sending to all the web servers and all that. So to maintain this DNS, generally there should be a like, if let's suppose if you're building this in a normal your office, or it could like office data center or a normal data center, you need to manage the DNS. You need to install a software called Bind, using which you need to manage. And for the load balancer, you need to have something called HA proxy and Nginx, where you need to write saying that one request should go here, second request should go here. All these kind of logics you need to maintain. And even this load balancer also, it has some kind of problem. For example, let's suppose if 10,000 users start hitting, and suddenly the 10,000 becomes 1 million users, then this load balancers will throttle out. Like it will not have the way that it can send all the requests to the behind architecture. So that's a problem. Again, you need to make this load balancer also scalable, that you need to add multiple load balancers, and this load balancer should be able to increase its capacity and all that. So that could be a big problem if you're running in a data center, and all this managing and all these things will be a very big problem. Now let's suppose the data is growing, and you can't maintain using a single DB. You want to have some scalable databases, so that you'll have the connection information and all the different kind of informations that you can maintain using a NoSQL DB. So we can introduce another component like Cassandra or MongoDB or something. So where it takes care of all that. So generally now the application is like relational databases will be taken care from the normal DB, and the all the NoSQL will take care of all the like any more information, and anything which has a key value or something like that. And now let's suppose you're hitting the 1 million users. So the application should be very fast. So maybe the things would be very fast here, but the things would be very slow when it comes to the database, and when it's running some like a complex query. Let's suppose if you're trying to search something in the Facebook, your friends from this college with this age, with this locality and all that, it becomes a very complex query. So these things cannot handle. So then you need to have some kind of read replicas or cache or all that. So then you need to introduce some DB cache. So you need to install some kind of server here, where you need to install Redis or Memcached or something which will handle the cache. So now the application is a bit complex. It became into this, but now there are some kind of problems in this architecture. Let's suppose you are uploading your photos or videos or reels or all that, that cannot be stored in on these disks, right? So if this machine goes down, all your information also goes down. So now you need to have some kind of external storage for the images or videos or something, and which should be very much scalable, and the size should grow as required as that, and all these things. Now we'll introduce some external storage here. Okay, so when you upload your image or any video or anything, then that goes and stores into this external storage. And you also introduce some like all the media files goes into this thing. And now you need to have some kind of content filters also. Like for example, you can't upload any of the pictures. There will be a policy where you can only upload certain kind of pictures and reels and all that, videos in the YouTube or anywhere, right? So you'll have a content filter where it contains everything, and it will store in the external storage. So this is a very simple Facebook or Instagram kind of architecture that we are seeing here. And now you need more things like if you want to make this more complex, then like for example, there will be ads will be generated for you based on your usage, and there will be based on your clicks. There would be some kind of ad and all that, how you're scrolling, all those kind of details they need to capture. So further they'll do something called click stream analysis. So based on that, they'll generate the ads and gives a defined content for you. And you also need to store this click stream analysis also. So for that, you can introduce another external storage for the images and all that. And now if you see, there is also a very bigger kind of architecture where it takes your clicks and it will store the information, and based on some business intelligence, and all the ads generation will be there. This part is completely related to the revenue generation for Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, where they send ads and all that. So this particular architecture speaks about how the users will use the application. This architecture is like something which will feed into these kind of like all these click streams analysis and Hadoop and data warehousing, business intelligence, where it generates the ads and everything for you. So this may be a bit confusing for the starters or anything. Like let's just try to understand. Later we'll see how the cloud will make these things very easy, and how you can easily work it up. And now, if more people will use from the mobile, right, rather than the web browsers, generally these days, like we'll never literally use the Facebook from the web browsers rather than we'll use more into the mobile. So you can have another, like for example, for consumption of the mobile, the videos should be in a different format, and for the consumption of the web browser it should be in a different format. So now you need to have a video converter, like images or video converter, so that the people will, like internally it will convert into the mobile based kind of videos, and you can consume that. And finally, let's suppose there are some viral videos or something that they just want to put that as a main thing so that people are consuming that a lot. They'll put in a content delivery network so that instead of coming here itself you get that video and you can watch it. So this is a very complex architecture as of this. And there are a lot of other things also, like for example, you get a notifications from the Facebook, like whenever someone likes your picture, or like when someone you're following posts something, and you get an email notifications, and all these like chatting, message queues, and all this architecture grows this big if you see simple Facebook or Instagram or anything. Now let's see how, like for example, for each and every component, if you want to build in the data center, as I told you need a bind for this, you need a HA proxy for this, and for everything you need a different kind of software here. So now if you want to move this to cloud, let's suppose we'll understand the cloud based on this. So now let's try to replace each component what exactly the AWS clouds give you. Then you can understand how the way the different services are in the AWS. So let's first replace the network. So the complete network part, if you replace with the AWS, so it looks like this. So you will have something called virtual private cloud in the AWS, which will create the complete network for you, so that you can just install all the application in this particular VPC we will call virtual private cloud. So it will give you a networking object here. Now, if you replace any of these VMs, let's suppose if you want to replace the VMs, we'll put something called a service called EC2. So if you just go back here, so to this one, you'll have EC2, right? So this is a service I'm talking about. So the EC2 is nothing but Elastic Compute Cloud, which will give you a virtual machine where you can run any of the servers. So it looks like this EC2. So we will replace all these. Let's suppose we replaced this VMs to this EC2, and now this particular symbol indicates that it is scalable. You can go on add any number of EC2 instances for the web or for the app servers based on your requirement. Now, if we replace the database and the SQL part here, so we'll replace using something called RDS. It's a relational database service. We just create the database and we'll add to the application. We'll not do anything more. And for this NoSQL, we have something called DynamoDB. So it's a key value pair where we can run the Redis or Memcached or anything in this internally also. So now let's replace some components of DNS and all that. So if you replace the cache, it will be an elastic cache. So caching is nothing but it will store you the complex queries, so that once you are hitting the database, it will resolve for you and give you. So for this, you have an elastic cache. And for the load balancer, you have something called elastic load balancer. So it can just get a query, like for example, if it is facebook.com or mobile.facebook.com, or let's suppose if you're going with an Amazon example.com. So if it is Prime, it can send the required request to some other EC2 instance. If it is shopping.amazon.com, it can send the request to some other thing. So Elastic Load Balancer is quite powerful. We'll deal with this more when I'm telling the sessions, but we can just replace this load balancer with Elastic Load Balancer. And this DNS will be replaced with something called Route53, where you try to add the entries like facebook.com, videos.facebook.com, pictures.facebook.com, all these kind of things. So now let's replace this kind of content. So in AWS, there is external storage called S3, where you can store like unlimited storage, a petabytes of the data you can store. So and the filter, there is something called recognition. So like for example, it's a kind of, this filter is it's an artificial intelligence filter. It will recognize everything in a particular image. So if I just show you one particular service here, so let me just show you this. So it's a machine learning. You can just integrate. So it can look into everything. Like it will look the face and compare the different photos, and it can identify the photos, and it can also identify an analysis, like whether a person is smiling or how he is and all that. And it can also give the labels, and it can read anything. Like it also recognizes celebrity recognition. Everything will be there. So in this way, you can just come here and you can replace that filter in your architecture with recognition, which will filter out all the images and the videos, and it will upload into the S3. So wherever you see external storage here, so you see external storage in these three components, right? You can replace that with an S3 buckets. So we'll discuss about more about S3 buckets and everything in the class again. So for conversion, we'll run something called Lambda, which is a serverless thing. So whenever you upload a photo into, like, let's suppose you upload a video into the Facebook, it will recognize that a video is uploaded, and it will immediately run, and it will convert the video from MPEG or MP4 into something which can be read from the mobile. So this is a serverless, which will be triggered whenever you upload something. So this will give you an advantage instead of running every time. You'll only run when something is uploaded. So those kind of things will be there in the AWS. And all these things, like if you see the clickstream analysis, Spark and ETL and everything, you have something called Redshift, which is a data warehouse, EMR, which is a kind of Hadoop clusters and all that, and S3 bucket, again, as an external storage, and Kinesis will be for the clickstream analysis, and you have a ETL glue and all that. Let's suppose you don't know all these things. Even I don't know how to create them, everything in this, but at least we'll know that there are some services which can replace every component in a complex architecture also. That is the only reason people will try to move into the cloud. And this business logic and all that, in order to create the ads and everything, there is something called Athena, which takes all the inputs, and which will give you a kind of way we need to run the ads to this particular user. This guy is interested in some laptops or something. Let's give him the purchase related to the laptop. So these kind of decisions will be taken here. And coming to replacing many other things, now you have something called content delivery network. We'll replace something with a cloud front. So let's suppose if someone is watching the Prime, like based on their location, they need to get the content in the Prime or Netflix or all that, right? So based on that, we'll create something called cloud formation, and it will take care. And all these things, mobile notifications, email queues and everything, these are the services that you have in the AWS. Okay. And finally, this is the whole thing when you move from a normal data center to the AWS. I'm just giving you these names. For now, you don't understand anything. I know that EC2 or ELB, that is the reason you came into this course. It is not to confuse you, but it is to tell you that any complex architecture can be, normally, if you see in the data center, you can migrate it to the AWS, and you can replace each and every service in using an AWS services. So now you got a gist of at least services what are there in the AWS, and why we need to use in a different places like this, and all of them. And now, and you'll also have, if you want to, like, if the developers want to build their APIs in the AWS, they have something called API gateway. And if you want to manage all the users and all that, you have a service called Cognitive. It is only a service introduction, don't confuse with any of the things. I'm just giving you an examples of services and what it does. In detail, we'll discuss in a course, and we'll go with more and more architectures like this after each and every section that I'm trying to deal with that. And you have a lot of other services like IAM, KMS, which will do the security management in the AWS. Like, there are a lot of security in the cloud. You can literally put the security in every place in the cloud. Like, this is WAF is nothing but it's a kind of wireless, like a firewall kind of thing, where you can handle the DDoS attacks or something to your application. And you have certificate manager. You have something which runs on everywhere, and it checks whether there is any vulnerabilities and all that. So these days, security is very important, and AWS provides all these services that you see is related to the security. And finally, coming to deployments, let's suppose you want to create this complete architecture in 1 hour or half an hour. Then you automate this one. You automate this using something called cloud formation. So you write a simple YAML scripts or something. This is more for the DevOps people, where they write something, a YAML, which can create all these services in one go. Like, if you want to have this complete stack, you just run this scripts. This will create everything for you. It will create EC2 instances. It will create storage, databases, and everything. So AWS provides a particular service called CloudFormation, which is useful for this one. And finally, you can have like a lot of people interacting, like you'll have, finally, I'll just show you this one. So you have something called CI/CD, where you have continuous integration and continuous deployment, where you'll have the code which is moving into a pipeline, and where it can create any kind of applications for you, deploying the applications. Let's suppose there is version 1 and you want to move to the version 2. AWS provides all this using this code deploy, code build, and all this. So this is more into the CI/CD, continuous integration and continuous development. So the course deals till here. I'll tell you all the services that I've shown you, but not some of the ones like Kinesis, which is related to like clickstream analysis or Hadoop or data warehouse. These kind of things we don't discuss, but at least we'll discuss about creating a 3-tier applications, creating the load balancers, EC2 instances, databases. How do you do the monitoring part? How do you do the network notifications, creating every network, and how do you automate the things? How do you build a CI/CD for the complete application and deploy the things? All these things will be discussed in this course. And now you can just see there are different services what AWS provides you in this way. Like for the compute, we used EC2, like we used the load balancer, we used that is ELB, Lambda functions as a serverless computing in our architecture. So in this way, we'll discuss the things and why you need to learn AWS when you compare to Azure or anything. Now you can just see the market, like you have the, like let me just show you these reports. So if you see the quadrant report, how the this is a Gartner report. Like if you see all the clouds right now, the AWS is a leading, which takes the 40%. Like at least in 2022, also it leads about 40% of the market is completely with the AWS when you compare to the Azure and Google or anything. So you can see there are more opportunities for you, even for job changers or also even someone is like looking for the cloud education and all that. AWS is a better one to start with. So that's all from the demo. That I just want to show you an application and some kind of way how we use the cloud so that it would be better instead of just showing what all the services AWS has and confusing you with a lot of things. So I'll open for the doubts. If you have anything, you can just ask me. Anything about session or anything about more about details about the cloud also, I'm open to answer them. Any doubts or anything? Is it fast or is it fine?
So, is this, more onto the solution architect part or AWS DevOps?
It would be a midway between the architect and DevOps. So generally, I show you more architecture so that you can understand in detail. Like without architecture, you literally can't understand why the particular service is required. There are a lot of confusions. Whether you should use this one or that one. So it would be both the things, like some architectures and some kind of at least one or two automations will take up with the DevOps and deal with that. It depends
Yeah,
upon like how you're
I'm
interested more.
more looking towards the architecture part. So, yeah.
Okay. Any other doubts?
Sandeep, one question.
Yeah, Jagger.
So, what is DevOps and how it is related to the AWS? So,
Okay.
so far, like we have just covered all the services, right? Services, right,
Yeah.
in AWS.
Yeah.
So how is related to, yeah, DevOps?
Okay. DevOps is more related to like it's like automation and whatever you do regularly, to minimize the efforts and to make the deliverables very fastly, to deploy the things very fastly. It's a process and where you have a certain kind of technologies where you implement them. For example, DevOps deals with something called the continuous integration and continuous delivery. So where once you submit a code, it will be like it looks into it, creates a build. It will check whether the build is successful, whether whatever the code that you have written is successful or not, so that the releases will make more and more often and more faster, and in a very less kind of bugs will come up in the releases and all that. So CI/CD is one part of the DevOps. And one more thing is, how do we provision this infrastructure? Let's suppose the similar stack you want to create for dev guys, QA, UAT, a staging stack and all that, right? So for that, you need to have an automation, like you write some kind of code, like for example, you take a cloud formation, Terraform, or some kind of tool where you write all the code and you try to provision the things. So you do more and more automation in a kind of DevOps to make the things simplified. So there should be a cloud, like for example, almost all the architectures are moving into, like all the workloads are moving into the cloud, right? Even the DevOps also, which is a part, cloud is a part of it. So you run your workloads in the cloud. So you want to automate everything which is there in the cloud. So using the, like any kind of Terraform or cloud formation, you try to create all these EC2 instances, load balancers and everything with a single click, something like that. So that is where DevOps as a more prominent role will come up.
Okay. So will you be covering DevOps on this course?
Yeah, cloud formation is something, a tool which and also the CI/CD part, the final one that I showed you about code build, code pipeline, and all that. That is a part of DevOps itself.
Okay. Okay, Sandeep. Yeah, thank you.
And for Anand, like you have asked about the AWS admin and all that, right? So what we cover in this is the VPC part. How do you create the subnets, and how do you create an IAM users? How do you create an EC2 instance? All this comes under the AWS admin itself.
So what are all the services you will be covering like in the course?
So mainly
Any
the
particular
services.
list or
Yeah, so actually AWS holds a lot of services. Many of the services generally we don't need. For example, if it is related to more big data or artificial intelligence or gaming or anything, there are separate services for those things. But what we'll cover in this course is what mainly you require as a fundamental to anything. So like, let's suppose, how do you create a virtual machines? How do you take care of the networking? How do you take care of the security by IAM users and all that? And the databases part and microservices, how do you run the containers in the AWS? Like all these things are the major things that you need to know to go to any cloud or to run any of the workloads. So all these things will cover generally. So as I told you about the DevOps tools for continuous integration, like the code build, code commit, and all this, and automation tools like the cloud formation, all these things will cover. And the storage, like the external storage like S3 or a DynamoDB kind of things for a NoSQL databases. We cover all these things in this course.
okay. So how many days it will take normally to complete
It
the
will
course?
take 5 to 6 weeks. It will take at least the complete cloud.
Okay. So would you be covering any at the end, like any kind of a project or maybe something?
Yeah, generally what I do is whenever I complete a section, I'll give you the real time. For example, as a Facebook, I took you. So I'll take some real time examples and I'll show you how the like how do you build an architecture around that. So that is would be the main thing. So let's suppose you
Okay.
want to, like I have shown you the Facebook. Let's suppose you want to completely build with this a serverless architecture. You want to remove all the normal static components and you want to build something serverless. Then how we can do that? Or if you want to completely build using a microservice architecture like containers, Kubernetes. So AWS has something called EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service, and ECS, Elastic Container Services. So how do you, like we'll discuss about ECS more. Like EKS will be just an introduction and show you how what is a Kubernetes cluster and all that. So we'll deal with those things there. So it will be like microservices for something and serverless something, static infrastructure something, and how do we create a phase like a simple application, web application. All these things we'll discuss here. Along with that, regularly I'll give you some kind of activity that you need to do on your own cloud and you can come up. And if you have any doubts, we'll discuss that.
Okay. Thank you, Sandeep.
Thanks a lot. Yeah. Regarding this question about AWS Associate certification, so we'll generally cover much of the things which are required for the AWS Associate certification. Actually, we'll go more into the DevOps also, which is not required for the AWS architect certification also, but it will cover much of the things. Like you can, like it goes as a real time, so it's not, you can easily cover all of them. So Chandra, yeah. Okay, I'm done with the demo. And if you don't have any questions, we can drop. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice weekend. Okay, Anand, let me just answer your question. Yeah, there are a lot of other services also. This is something like admin requires more other ones also. We'll discuss them. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a nice weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.